remarkably logical and analytical mind.
Thank you. I prefer the concrete, the graspable, the provable.
You'd make a splendid computer, Mr.
Netanyahu denies West Bank settlement freeze announced at Aqaba summit. While U.S. officials claimed the summit in Jordan was a positive step towards, or was a positive step for Israelis and Palestinians, Israelis' far-right officials made it clear that what happened in Jordan will stay in Jordan. Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu on 26 February denied that the government has any plans to halt the expansion of illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank, contradicting a statement issued earlier in the day by the U.S. State Department at the conclusion of the Aqaba summit. Contrary to reports, construction and regulation in the West Bank will continue according to the original planning and construction schedule without any changes. There is and will not be any freeze, Netanyahu tweeted on Sunday. Israeli National Security Advisor Zachi Hanegbi echoed Netanyahu's words, saying in a statement, "In the coming months, Israel will authorize 9 outposts and will approve 9,500 new housing units in the West Bank. There is no settlement freeze or change in the status quo in Al-Aqsa Mosque, and there is no limitation on army activities." These announcements contradict the claims made in statements following the conclusion of the Aqaba summit in Jordan, which alleged an Israeli commitment to stop discussion of any new settlement units for 4 months and to stop authorization of any outposts for 6 months. The summit, hosted by Jordan kings Abdullah and Aqaba on the Red Sea coast, was attended by Israel, the Palestinian Authority, Egypt, Jordan, and the U.S. This gathering coincided with a new explosion of violence in the occupied West Bank. As the summit got underway, 2 Israeli settlers were shot and killed by a lone Palestinian gunman near Nablus. In response to this attack, dozens of Israeli settlers led a violent rampage on the village of Huwara on Sunday night, killing 1 Palestinian and injuring nearly 400, and burning dozens of homes and vehicles. According to the joint readout of the Aqaba summit, Israel and the PA agreed to de-escalate tensions and prevent further violence ahead of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. Following the summit, Netanyahu's Jewish supremacist coalition allies rejected the agreements announced. What happened in Jordan, if it happened, will remain in Jordan, National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir said. I mean, to cast doubt that it happened is just nefarious. Yeah. And from breaking latest news, usually the translation of this site is a little bit inaccurate, so forgive me as I adjust on real time. Once again, Netanyahu tricks us on Jewish settlements, Mondoweiss. In Israel, Palestine, the U.S., Jordan, and Egypt just held a one-day summit in the Jordanian city of Aqaba yesterday intended to cool down the flames in Israel-Palestine. Its main aim was to build trust. The nation issued a joint communique at its end, which stated that Israel was committed to stop discussing setting up new settlement units for 4 months and stop approving any new settlements for 6 months, and that the two sides, Israel and Palestine, would work closely together to prevent further violence in the name of advancing towards a just and lasting peace, as Reuters reported. But yesterday evening, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tweeted that the whole part about the settlement freeze was fake news. In Hebrew, he wrote that the headlines were tweets just hearsay. In contradiction to the tweets, the building and the retroactive legalization of outposts in Judea and Samaria, this is Netanyahu's words, of course it's West Bank, will continue in accordance with the original timeline for planning and building with no changes. There is no freeze and will be no freeze. How could it be? Was Reuters lying? Did the U.S. just issue a lie without consulting Netanyahu? Haaretz Daily seeks to explain the discrepancy. In the joint announcement, there was no reference to freezing decisions that had already been made regarding construction in the settlements. Sources familiar with the talks told Haaretz that the thousands of housing units greenlit last week are all the construction plans that were ready for approval. So the massive wave of construction permits, over 7,000 permits, was passed a few days prior to the summit and will not be annulled by it. Likewise, the 9 settler outposts which were retroactively legalized would not be affected by the supposed freeze. It's a done deal. It's worth reflecting upon the magnitude of those 7,000 permits. Last year, Israel issued 4,427 permits for construction of Jewish settlements in 2021. 3,645 were approved. In other words, Israel's already processed a bulk of permits which far exceeds its tempo in the past years. In fact, almost doubles it. So it's surely satiated its colonialist thirst for the coming 6 months of stoppage time. Haaretz pretty much confirms that understanding. There's not even a pause in pouring concrete. According to sources familiar with the talks, the commitment not to discuss new construction in the settlement for 4 months does not constitute a real concession on Israel's part. This is because the construction planning process requires a great deal of time and effort, so it would take several months regardless before the council could approve additional housing units. And these supposed concessions were being offered ahead of the summit. Fully a week ago, Haaretz reported that Israel has informed the U.S. that it will now build or improve new Jewish settlements in the West Bank beyond the 9 that are approved last week, a move which enraged Western leaders. Notice how the supposed liberal opposition Yair Lapid responded to that report of a concession a week ago. Opposition leader Yair Lapid said that he was surprised that the government agreed to the freeze. We never agreed to this despite repeated requests from the Americans. So Lapid, the good guy as far as liberal Zionists are concerned, was basically boasting at his party, meaning that he was a tougher against the Americans and that he was a tougher settler than the Netanyahu. So much for opposition. Michael Link, former UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in the occupied Palestine territory, observed these political dynamics ahead of the summit when he wrote, "On the other hand, Netanyahu's far-right allies in the new government, particularly Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, were relatively quiet about the pause, indicating that they understand the prevailing American-Israeli quid pro quo on the settlements. That reference to quid pro quo means a deal that the United States cut with other countries at the UN Security Council to water down a resolution proposed by the UAE, calling all the settlements what they are, flagrant violations of international law. The resolution morphed into a non-binding Security Council statement that avoids mentioning their illegality, but that silence on the part of Netanyahu's partners in war crimes was temporary. Smotrich, who's now in multiple ministerial positions and poised to realize his full apartheid plan, tweeted yesterday, "I have no idea what they talked about or didn't talk about in Jordan. I heard about this useless conference from the media just like you, but the one thing I do know, there will be no freeze of the building and development in the settlements, not even for one day. It's under my authority." Smotrich's tweet was published exactly 2 hours before Netanyahu tweeted that there will be no freeze. Following Smotrich's tweet, his alter ego and fellow Minister of National Security Ben-Gvir tweeted his own mockery of the summit. What happened in Jordan, if it happened in Jordan, stays in Jordan. Ben-Gvir and the legal Jewish outpost settlement of Evyatar calling for its legalization February 27, 2023 from his Twitter feed. So there you have it. The freeze was a trick. It wasn't a real concession. It just sounded good. He gave Netanyahu the opportunity to have his cake and eat it. He's now supposedly compromising, but the concessions were already made. When the noises came from the further right, and he's the most left member of his coalition, about him being soft, he can assure them that he wasn't. This is very much like the now famous secret video from 2001, which surfaced a decade later, in which Netanyahu explained to a settler family how he manipulated the Oslo agreements to avoid a racing to the 1967 lines. How did we do it? Defend military zones, I said, are security zones. From my point of view, the Jordan Valley is defined as a military zone, right? That video is where Netanyahu also boasted, "I know what America is. America is a thing you can move very easily. Move it in the right direction, they won't get in the way." Recall that Biden was in the Obama administration in 2016 when it abstained on a UN Security Council resolution that described the settlements as flagrant violation of international law, but Obama was a lame duck and Biden is running for election. That's enraging, but it should be equally shocking that Yair Lapid made a statement that echoes Netanyahu and Smotrich. And so it continues. The Israeli settlement enterprise is a national value, and its quasi-constitutional nation-state law of 2018 states, and it specifies exclusively Jewish settlement. It's not going away. It's not going away. It's not even freezing, not even temporarily. The minister, now singularly in charge of it, Smotrich, says it won't even freeze for a day, and these settlements sit at the very core of the whole matter, as Link writes. The settlements are the engine of the Israeli occupation, the facts on the ground for Israel's looming quest to annex the West Bank, and the source of many of the human rights violations against the Palestinians living in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. It's not complicated at all. In fact, Link notes, the illegality of the Israeli settlements is also one of the most settled issues in modern international law. And here we are discussing whether it's a freeze or no freeze, while Netanyahu, Smotrich, and Ben Giver chuckle amongst themselves. They've tricked us again. We really are easy to move. They should speak for themselves because they've tricked them again, and they really are easy to move in my estimation. And from Al Jazeera, Netanyahu says no freeze in settlement construction in West Bank. Barely hours after Jordan hosted a meeting between Israel and the Palestinian Authority in the Red Sea city of Aqaba, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the building of Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank will continue to go ahead. Sunday's meeting, which was also attended by Egypt and the United States, was called in order to discuss steps to de-escalate tensions amid surging violence in the occupied Palestinian territories. And from EnglishAlMayadeen.net, Israel contradicts Aqaba summit report, settlement process continues. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirmed Sunday evening in a response to a Jordanian statement regarding the results of the Aqaba summit that the construction of settlement outposts in the West Bank will continue without any charge. Netanyahu said on Twitter that contrary to what was published, construction and legislation in the West Bank settlements will continue according to the basic plans and times, and there's no freeze and there will not be a settlement freeze. In turn, the head of the Israeli National Security Council, Zachi Hanegbi, also confirmed that contrary to reports about the Aqaba summit, which was held in Jordan with the participation of delegations from Egypt, Jordan, Israel, Palestine, and the U.S., there's no change in Israeli policy during the coming months. Hanegbi added 9 settlement outputs will be legalized and 9,500 new units will be built in the West Bank. And as reported by Israeli media, Hanegbi also stated, in accordance with Netanyahu, that there will be no construction freeze or change in the status quo in Al-Aqsa Mosque, and there are no restrictions on the occupation's army activities in the West Bank, contradicting the Jordanian statement. The words of the senior security officials of the Israeli occupation contradict what the Jordanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs said in a statement following the summit earlier today. According to the announcement of the Jordanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the occupation government and the Palestinian Authority confirmed their joint readiness and their commitment to immediate action to stop unilateral measures for 3 to 6 months. The Jordanian Foreign Ministry said the meeting included an Israeli commitment to stop discussing the establishment of any new settlement units for 4 months and to stop approving any new settlement outputs for a period of 6 months. Moreover, the statement added that the occupation government and the Palestinian Authority affirmed reducing escalation and preventing further violence in addition to agreeing to meet again in this format in Sharm el-Sheikh in the Arab Republic of Egypt next March. The Jordanian statement concluded that the Palestinian and the Israeli sides affirmed their commitment to all previous agreements between them and worked to achieve a just and lasting peace and reaffirmed the need to commit to reducing escalation on the ground and preventing further violence. Again, that's from Al-Mayadeen. And from AA.com.tr, this is Israeli premier says it will not freeze building settlements in the West Bank. Netanyahu denies media reports on halting settlement constructions for 4 months following a Aqaba meeting. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said there will be no change in the plan to build illegal Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank. Netanyahu's remarks came following a meeting held in Aqaba, Jordan on Sunday, with the participation of Palestine, Israel, Jordan, the U.S., and Egypt. The Israel premier denied reports by the Israel media that Israel, following the meeting, decided to freeze the construction of new settlements in the West Bank for 4 months. Construction and arrangement in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, will continue according to the original planning and schedule without any changes. There's not and will not be any freezing, Netanyahu said. Security meeting in Aqaba. The Jordan Foreign Ministry published the closing statement of the security meeting in Aqaba, saying the government of Israel and the Palestinian National Authority confirmed their joint readiness and commitment to immediately work to end unilateral measures for a period of 3 to 6 months. This includes an Israeli commitment to stop discussion of any new settlement units for 4 months and to stop authorization of any outposts for 6 months, it added. The meeting of the city of Aqaba was called by the U.S., Egypt, and Jordan to discuss de-escalating tensions between the Palestinian and Israeli delegates. The Aqaba meeting was the first of its kind since the U.S.-sponsored peace talks between the delegates collapsed in 2014 over Israel's refusal to halt the settlement constructions and release Palestinians in prison before '93. The meeting came amid tensions across the occupied territories following Israeli military raids into Palestinian towns. At least 62 Palestinians were killed by Israeli army fire in the West Bank since the start of the year, according to Palestinian figures. And from Wali News, there's an OIC meeting. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation has convened its extraordinary meeting in the context of Israel's increasing aggression in Palestine. According to the Saudi press agency, an extraordinary meeting of the Executive Committee of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation will be held tomorrow, February 28th, Tuesday. This meeting is being convened in the context of the recent open aggression by Zionist forces in the city of Nablus on the West Bank, killing 11 Palestinians and injuring 100 others. The meeting was called to emphasize the need to fulfill its obligation to end these ongoing crimes of Israel and to provide the necessary international protection to the Palestinian people. The meeting comes under the framework of coordinated efforts with the international community to protect the Palestinians. And I'm going to open a channel here. And remember, your engagement through a like, share, and or subscribe will catapult us, propel us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission to truthfully go where no news will have been going before.